Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Need to Read. I just want to start off by thanking everyone that listened yesterday. It reached far further than I ever thought it would be, and I am so grateful for everyone who shared it and sent me messages. It was literally like losing my virginity again, but with way more positive feedback. I had such a spring in my step yesterday, so honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I'm so grateful and thank you very, very much. Now, this episode is going to be a special sort of quarantine reads episode. So I'm going to give you 3 books that will help you. One is going to be quite an easy read if you haven't got into reading just yet and you're looking for something that will ease you in. Second book is going to be slightly more educational, just so that we can all sort of better ourselves whilst we're in this quarantine. We're all in this together. It'd be a nice time to educate ourselves in different sort of facts of life, and I'm hoping that you'll take from the book the similar sort of thing that I have. And then the third book is going to be about dealing with change. I'm not going to spend too long on that one. It's quite a short book. It is only about 70-80 pages long, but it's a really simply put explanation on how people can deal with change. And of course everyone, for the most part, is going through some of that at the moment. And from that point, I'm going to introduce a new feature, and then you can get rid of me for the evening or morning whenever you're listening to this. Now, the first book that I want to introduce today is a book that I finished on Sunday morning. I actually cried when I finished this book. You can ask anyone that's known or knows me, my parents, my sister, any family members, close friends, any ex-girlfriend can definitely attest to this. I'm a bit of a crier. I've been alright this year, and this is the first time that I've had a proper cry. It's the This Is Gonna Hurt book by Adam Kay. That was Book of the Year in 2018. He's got an incredible way with sort of dark humour. It's informative, and it takes you through quite an emotional journey through the diaries of a junior doctor. Now, in the first couple of pages, he opens you up to the sort of sense of humour that he has when he likens himself to a medical Anne Frank. So it's shocking, it's funny, it's dark, and it's also informative. It makes you feel like you're getting smarter as you read along, because every time something medical pops up, there's a little asterisk at the bottom of the page. You get to learn a little bit about whatever medical issue it is that's come up there in the book. Now, this book makes you definitely feel sort of how lucky we are to have the NHS, and it gives you a nice insight to sort of how overstretched they are and what it actually is like to be working there on the front line. Throughout the diary entries, he discusses so many different points about how we're lucky to have the NHS, where everyone's had someone that they've sorted out with chemo, whether they've sorted out your STDs, and a couple of horrifying stories, including a girl who sort of tried to perform her own labial reduction. So at risk of sounding too intelligent there, he saw a girl who tried to cut the lips of her vagina off. There are countless times in the book where he discusses moments where you get a real insight to just how stressful it is working with the NHS and on the front line. There was a time where he was pricked with a needle, and when he went through the tests, he asked out of interest to the woman who was doing the tests what would happen if the test did come back positive and he'd actually got HIV from this needle prick. She mentioned how he wouldn't have to do labour or go into theatre or anything like this, and he mentions how he didn't quite want to say to her that would take the sting out of the HIV. Now, all of the stories are brought together over, it's about 6 years of these diary entries. The book's not very big, it's only sort of 250 pages, but the ending is fantastic. That's where it really hits home. Not to sort of push any political agenda, I believe he might have been trying to, just in terms of his digs against the health secretary and stuff like that, but that's obviously his prerogative. It's incredible. I'm stuck for words in that, which is not going to be good. Maybe I'll get better in the future when I'm going to be looking for words to review a book with. But it's emotional, it's hard-hitting, and it really does make you think about those people around you. If you know people that work in the NHS, I, for one, my mum's in the NHS. She's a midwife. When I was sat there crying on a Sunday morning, all I wanted to do is go give her a hug and just say thank you for everything that she does, because especially with this book being based around sort of gynae issues, I know she's definitely dealt with some of this shit in the past before. So in terms of how easy it is to read, it's small chunks. It's a diary. If you only want to read 5 pages a day or a page at a time, you can definitely do so with this book. And for a first-time author, I think he's done an incredible job. This book actually came out in 2018, as I mentioned earlier, and it won 4 book awards that year. Slightly out of the ordinary, I'd actually been recommended this book by a girl. So I know in the first episode you heard about me just shoving books down people's throat. I was actually recommended this one. So thank you for who recommended this. In terms of Adam Kay's other books, he does have another one out. It's called 'Twas the Night Shift Before Christmas. I haven't read the whole thing. I had read a couple of chapters in November last year. My sister was home after an operation and was drugged up to the hilt, so couldn't actually concentrate enough to read a book, and I'd bought her this book. So I played the live version of Audible for her. We got 2 chapters in until she was sick to death of hearing my voice and got kicked out and wasn't allowed to read it anymore. But I'll definitely be picking that up next time I see her, and I'll get that. And that'll be going straight on my reading list. Now, on to the next book. I want to make a bit of a diversion here in terms of current sort of events and what's going on in the world at the moment. It seems that every celebrity is throwing their home workouts at you and showing you how to do a press up and how to do a sit up and telling you how they stay in shape, which, if one is obviously bullshit. That's not how they're going to stay in shape in isolation. They've probably got a lovely home gym. Now, this is to the point that I was almost expecting the Queen to be showing us how she's going to keep fit in isolation when she went through her speech on Sunday. Now, this book, it's educational, it's funny, it's from another first-time author. It's James Smith's Not a Diet book. Now, James Smith is well known on Instagram. He's a personal trainer, and he's the guy that's got the calorie deficit out there into the world. And if you don't know what calorie deficit is, I'm not about to tell you because I'll mess it up. So to spare you lot the experience of me just boshing up all the science that's in this book and presented in a really nice way, I would suggest initially buy the book. That's going to be my first plug there. Now, one of my favourite things about this book is that he plugs in jiu-jitsu and promotes jiu-jitsu. It's a sport that I fell in love with last year, and it's led on to so many things for me in terms of starting trying new things and giving me the confidence to do new things, as well as you get to get strangled by all of your friends in a padded room, and who doesn't want to do that? Back to the book. My favourite chapter in this book, I read this in about 2 days, I think it was, in January. The Laws of the Universe section of this book, James talks about a few different things. One is Pareto's 80-20 law, where, let's say, for example, you're in a job, you've got 20% of your clients causing 80% of your headaches. If you cut out those 20% of your clients, guess what? You've lost 80% of your headaches. That can work in relationships too. We all hold on to people. You might have 20% of your friends causing 80% of your headaches. And there's no shame in having a look at that and thinking, right, well, I kind of don't want these headaches anymore. So it's thought-provoking in that sense. He's also got the sunk cost fallacy. He talks about this in terms of dieting and in terms of relationships. When someone's on a diet for so long and it's not working, they've invested so much time and money into paying to be in something like Slimming World or something like that. You're invested in it, so the cost, as it were, has sunk. You're not very likely to walk away from it because you're waiting for that point in when it works. That's how it works in terms of diets, and James promotes the fact of just walking away from those. If it's not working for you, you just walk away. Interestingly, when he talks about relationships, he talks about sort of in the modern day, people say that they don't want to break up with their partner because they've been with them for 4 years, even though they're in a loveless, sexless relationship. You get a clear indication of James's no bullshit approach to fitness and life throughout this book. In terms of the chapters, there are other ones that stand out. This one isn't for me, but female fat loss. There's so many sort of female influencers out there that will tell you their secret to fat loss is this particular drink or that particular drink. James has a whole chapter on that. If you listen to it on the Audible, it's 26 minutes long. If you read the chapter, it's however long you want to take to read it. Now, even if you're not female, of course the book's got plenty for you. The chapters in this book cover a wide range of topics, and they're all interesting, well written, and got James's own touch of humour in there as well. You've got habits, the essentials for a good life, like I said, the laws of the universe. Effort and ambition was a really powerful chapter in that book, and it's all brought together really nicely at the end. This book can leave you feeling inspired, of course, leave you better educated on topics that are going to help you sort of further on with your life, especially with your mindset. That was definitely something that stood out to me in this book. And like I said at the start, in terms of as a first-time author, the writing on the book's incredible, and the humour's great, and it's very informative. Now, so it's definitely something that I would recommend if you're looking to educate yourself while we're all stuck inside, so that when we're allowed out again, and when we're allowed to exercise or go to gyms, or allowed to do more things into able to sort of bettering ourselves as human beings, then this book should definitely be on your list. The third book that I wanted to talk about, as I said earlier, is about dealing with change. It's a book, like I said, that I'm not going to spend too long on because it's not too long of a book, but it's called Who Moved My Cheese? It's a tale of two mice and the different ways in which they deal with someone moving their cheese within the maze. I really wish I could explain it more without ruining it, but I can't. It teaches you how to not get upset when things change, in terms of making sure that your mindset is aligned with moving forward, as opposed to sort of spending time dwelling on the past and always doing what you've always done. And it's a really powerful little book that can flip a switch in your brain and get you thinking differently. Now, I want to introduce a new segment, or feature, as it were, to this podcast, and it's not going to be something or from a book that everyone's going to be interested in buying, but it's something that's had a massive impact on my life, and I feel it's only right that I share this sort of line of thought with people on a weekly basis. As I mentioned in the first podcast, Stoic philosophy is something that pretty much changed my life for the better in terms of how I deal with issues and deal with change. And pretty much anything that comes up with life, I try my hardest to give a sort of Stoic point of view. Now, this is something some people have in them already. My dad's a good example of that. He's incredibly Stoic without really reading about it. They're the best kind of people, and you've got to hold on to those people. They can live in this way without having to chuck it in their brains and try hard at it, and I really do envy those people. The book that I'm going to pull this from is The Daily Stoic. It's Ryan Holiday's book. I was gifted this very kindly by my friend the other week, so I'm only a few pages in. Unfortunately, as much as it hurts my brain, it does start from January 1st, and obviously we're not on January 1st. As much as I'd love to wait until January 1st next year so I can do it in a perfect manner and do it by the book, I thought I'd get over the headache and start it anyway. What I'll do each week from now on is read a segment from this book and leave you with that to think about just before I wrap up the podcast. So the meditation that I want to talk about this week from the book is actually from January 2nd, and it states that education is freedom. So I'm going to read it word for word. So please don't think that this has come from my brain. This is just my favourite of the last 5 days. What is the fruit of these teachings? Only the most beautiful and proper harvests of the truly educated, tranquility, fearlessness, and freedom. We should not trust the masses, who say only the free can be educated, but rather the lovers of wisdom, who say that only the educated are free. And that's from Epictetus, who's a Greek philosopher. He was born a slave in a part of Greece, which is actually now modern-day Turkey. Now, the rest of the passage reads, "Why did you pick up this book? Why pick up any book? Not to seem passer, not to pass time on a plane, and not to hear what you want to hear. There are plenty of easier choices than reading. No, you picked up this book because you're learning how to live, because you want to be freer, fearless, and achieve a state of peace. Education, reading, and meditating on the wisdom of great minds is not to be done for its own sake. It has a purpose. Remember that imperative on the days that you start to feel distracted when watching television or having snacks seems like a better use of your time than reading or studying philosophy. Knowledge, self-knowledge in particular, is freedom. So now we're back to me and what comes from my brain, arguably more intelligent than Epictetus, of course. That quote and that meditation seem relevant, of course, because this podcast is about reading. Like I said in the first podcast, I'm not necessarily educated in a manner that I've got pieces of paper that say so, but I'm trying my hardest to read as much as I can so I can get as much knowledge on a sort of broad range of subjects. And that might be something that, if you're into non-fiction or listening to this podcast gets you into non-fiction, could sort of spark the fire in you, as it were. Now, that wraps up the podcast there. The books that I've recommended, once again, is Adam Kay's This Is Going to Hurt, his second book, Towards the Night Shift Before Christmas, and James Smith's Not a Diet book, and Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. Also, The Daily Stoic, which is Ryan Holiday. Now, thank you very much for listening once again. I promise that this might be the last podcast that I say thank you 5 times, but immense amount of gratitude coming from me for all those that listened and that have listened to this second podcast as well. I've had some really lovely messages from people that have inspired them to start reading, and for me, that is absolutely mad. Little old me has got someone to pick up a book. Serious self-esteem boost. And once again, thank you very much to everyone that messaged me. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at A Need to Read with the number 2 as opposed to the word 2. On YouTube, of course, this is where you're listening to it. It's A Need to Read. And a side note on an app called Goodreads. This is an app where you can fill in all the books that you've read so far and you rate the books out of 5, and Goodreads does all the hard work for you, so you don't have to spend hours sort of trawling through Amazon reviews to find the book that you want to read next. I'm on there as A Need to Read. You can have a look at the books that I've read over the past 18 months. You can keep up with the goal that I've all told you about of 52 books this year. You can create your own goal on books that you want to read this year. And the final point I want to get through, I did say that I'm going to be giving books away. So I've got a copy of This Is Going to Hurt here, and I've got a copy of Not a Diet book from James Smith. So please message me on Instagram. Like I said, I'm going to pick the people that I prefer. I'm going to base this on how nice the compliment is from you about my podcast. So be extra kind, boost my ego, boost my self-esteem, and I might send you a book. On a serious note, I'll pick it at random. Thanks again for listening. If you read any of the books that I go through, I'm going to put links in the comments section to the books on Amazon. I always find Amazon's probably the most competitive place in terms of pricing. And once you've read the book, please give it to someone. Remember, it is cool to be kind. And that wraps it up. Episode 2. Haven't sworn at my laptop today. Haven't sworn at the microphone too much. So I'm out of here. Take care, everyone.